What makes you happy?
Be yourself, be positive. Just another mindset.
Hello, friends, and welcome to a new episode of the Just Another Mindset podcast, the show that inspires you to change and live a more exciting life. My name is Ishmael, and each week I bring to you a relevant conversation, message, or topic that will not only entertain you, but help you to change towards a more meaningful and satisfying life, individually and collectively. Let us get inspired and embrace collective changes for the better. In today's episode, I have the great joy to talk to Muna Wagner, who's a pragmatic idealist, a freelance writer, facilitator, and presenter who is currently based in Berlin, Germany, and who was born in Brazil and raised in 5 different countries, and she has lived on 3 continents. Her core motivation in life is bringing people closer together while celebrating their diversity. And Muna is also the host of 2 podcasts, the Muna Logs, Hello World, Hello Change podcast, and she is a co-host of The Cynic and The Optimist. Muna and I talked a lot about communication, consciousness, and change, and we discussed how it feels to grow up in different countries and on different continents, what we can learn from different cultures, and where we still have perceived or real culture shocks. We discussed the role of communication, and we define what understanding really means. You will hear about how to create common ground for a discussion and a debate, and how to trust people that you don't know. You will hear stories from around the world about communication and about knowing yourself and understanding your trigger points. We talk about group dynamics and having different opinions, leaving your bubble of comfort, and why sometimes it's good to speak up. And with that, I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as Muna and I did. And please let us know what you think. Join the conversation. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. All right. So then, let's begin. And with that, welcome, Muna, to the Just Another Mindset podcast. It's a great pleasure to host you and to have you here. And I believe you're in Berlin today. How do you feel and what's on your mind?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your podcast, and greetings to Sri Lanka, because I think you're on the other end of the world. Berlin, how do I feel? Actually, I'm feeling pretty good. I enjoy that we have sunshine and blue skies. It's still not so warm, but sunshine is always something, it enhances my dopamine or whatever other hormones I carry to look. It increases positivity. So
very
that's
good.
A nice thing.
Very
How
good.
are you?
Very good. I'm also really good. I mean, we just in our pre-talk had a little bit of a conversation about Sri Lanka and the beauty of the country, that it's really an astonishing landscape here and the people are super nice. The food is really good. And let's say the infrastructure for working must be still created. But there's always ways. And hence, no, it's a really beautiful country. I'm very happy that we are here. And I mean, for you, it's not so far away from a place that you and I, in fact, have met or spent some time together with. So for me, it looks a lot like South India, but it feels a little bit different and at times very different. So it looks like Oroville and the Pondicherry area because people are very alike, but the way they behave, I mean, here all the local guys, and I know it's a very biased position I have, but as surf teachers, our guys who hang out at the beach, and everything is really chill, and it's an island flavor. So it is really, really, yeah, relaxed and nice. So it looks very similar to India, but it is not necessarily the same vibe, if I may say that.
It sounds tempting. I just know I've once spent, I think, 2 hours at Columbus Airport to change. That's my experience of Sri Lanka so far.
That was for many, many years also my experience. I remember that quite vividly, like in 2000. And I think our flight, my mom's and my flight, was delayed. And then out of a 3-hour stopover became a 27-hour stopover or something. And I remember this hotel room in Colombo. But I can really recommend stopping over for longer.
Worthwhile to leave the hotel room.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, it's really, it's a really nice country. I can really recommend that. And yeah, Muna, you're born in Brazil, and you have lived and you were brought up in multiple countries. And we, in fact, met in preparation for my time going to India after high school. And do you want to give us a little bit of a context? Where did you grow up? Who is Muna? And yeah, what makes you the person you are?
What makes me the person I am? Let's leave that for the second half of the answer. And if you have any suggestions, please pitch in. But no, I was born in Brazil. I grew up there for the first 2.5 years, and both of my parents are German, which is an unofficial joke between me and my mom, because I always tell her, come on, you met my dad while in Brazil. The country is so vast. Couldn't you have picked a Brazilian? Imagine me looking like a Brazilian. But that's just childhood issues, I guess. No, all is fine. Then we moved to Germany, and apparently I refused to speak German for the first 6 months because I was in a bit of a culture shock. Life and times and people are very different between Germany and Brazil. And I always say that that's why I talk so much these days, because I have to make up for lost time. 6 months of quietude is not my thing. And then we lived in several places in Germany, and afterwards we moved to Russia, just on the verge when there was the change between communism and, let's say, towards a more capitalist system, where we stayed another 2 years. And afterwards we moved to Luxembourg, which is, again, I guess, within Europe, one of the biggest contrasts you can have to a society changing or just coming out of communism. You come to a country full of affluence. Just imagine all the big companies or the designers and all the money that is spent on the outside. That was then another culture shock of sorts, but I continued to speak then. And afterwards, I lived in England. I stayed in the US, in India, and I think all of these places had an impact on me, because I would say I feel at home nearly everywhere, and yet out of sorts. But I find ways to connect to people, and I enjoy that. I enjoy finding the things that we have in common and appreciating the differences that we have at the same time, and just to connect to humans. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And it sounds like. No, I would say that from my point really describes you very well, that connecting with people from all over the world, I suppose, is easier for you than for others, at least, because you have such a vast experience and because you are such a open-minded, nice person. And does it still happen here and there that you have, I don't know, mini culture shocks or actual culture shocks, or is it that you didn't travel for some time, or yeah?
I think one of my perceived culture shocks, and sometimes I think it still gets me, is when I moved back to Germany after having spent most of my life abroad, that I realized that there are things I don't understand about this culture. Because, I mean, let's say the formative years I usually consider to be adolescence. I don't know what kind of music you listen to. What was your favorite song when you were 17? Any song pops into your mind?
I don't know. Lately, I was listening to some Eminem songs. Probably
nice.
It was one of those. But I think it was 14 when he played a concert where I went with my brother-in-law. But I think that's still
okay. Eminem, let's put it that way. I'm a bit older than you. Let's reveal that if it's not obvious. But I remember moving to Berlin, and then people were playing what is called Deutsche Welle, so basically German music from the 80s. And I just had no idea. There's one song that's called Scandal About Rosie. And I was like, I have no idea what happened to Rosie and what she did. And, you know, it was like beyond me. And then this person walks up to me and says, but, you know, where did you grow up? What have you been listening to? And it's like, well, abroad, and we listen to other stuff, you know, sort of. And I keep having these moments. What is culturally appropriate? I have a tendency to touch people too much in Germany because, you know, just for in a way of indecent places, in the sense of reaching out and touching the arm. And it's like, oh yes, I agree. And then people are like, this is not how we react. And then at the same time, when I'm in other places, I've been told, I was once in India actually, and I was asked if I was an actress. And I asked why, because I would roll my eyes so much. And apparently that is, you know, body language wise, too much for certain countries, areas, people, however you want to define it. So it's usually the little things which make me acknowledge, oh, okay, things are different here. And maybe just to give another anecdote, I think the most striking experience was that I worked at a film festival for a while, and I had a colleague. She was the daughter of South Korean immigrants. So she looks Korean, but was born and raised in Germany. So she knows about the scandal of Rosie and whatnot. And I thought it was so interesting because we walked in that town where we worked, and she was considered to be the stranger, the foreigner, whereas she knew the culture, and I looked like I fit in here. And I just thought, I have no idea what you guys are doing. But I blend in. So that's something that still pops up every now and then.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, no? Because then you look like the one that's supposed to be brought up in Germany, but you are really not. But you've spent like so many years in different cultures with very different environments. And the person that for some people doesn't look necessarily being from wherever, that makes sense. And all that also plays into your field of work, into communication, right? So I believe that this is also something that helped you, or that helps you communicating with people. And if we talk about communications, I mean, you already mentioned quite a few examples, body language and rolling your eyes. What does communication mean to you?
I would always say communication is everything. So whatever you want to pick, throw it at me and I'll prove that it's part of communication. I actually like Paul Václavic's axiom. He was a sociologist, amongst other things, and he has one axiom says, you cannot not communicate. And I think that is a very beautiful way of phrasing the importance of communication, because it's not about verbally expressing yourself, but if I remain silent, I'm also, you know, communicating something.
No, that's very true. And still there is different ways of communications, I believe, right? So you have verbal communication, definitely. You have all your body language. Is there something that you are interested in particular?
That's a good question. I like the mix and match situation, because it's not just, you know, just by focusing on one thing doesn't mean communication works. But generally speaking, I think I'm a big fan of active listening and personal observation or awareness, because, you know, if communication happens all the time, you are the most important figure, at least in your communication spectrum, right? Because you can't take yourself out of it. And then to be aware, to reflect, did I actually understand the person correctly, or am I assuming that I understand the person, or do I draw my own judgments, or am I, if we have depending on our personal dynamics, I might always feel that you might state something very neutral, and I might always feel pushed to do something, or I listen with an ear that says, no, you're making a judgment call, whatever it is. And then to really figure out what is the other person saying. This is for me, active listening is to concentrate on you. It's not about me, you know. Their communication is not we think it's such an active part in myself, but it's also the active part of giving my full attention to someone else, and then really try to see their perspective. And if I get triggered by something you say, that I then, that there's a light bulb going on within my little brain and saying, oh, wait a second, is this really, did Ismail want to insult me? Maybe he did. Fair enough. Or am I just jumping on a horse, that's passing by, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, now I feel triggered. It has nothing to do with you at all, but I'll blame you nonetheless. And to develop that discernment. So it's an inner and outer process. And I think that's why I'm completely fascinated by it.
No, absolutely. And I mean, there's a few questions, segues that I would actually like to dig in a little bit deeper. But the first one is, if you say this is communication that works, do you think that the same communication, that we both would necessarily have a good understanding of that communication works? Or when is communication working? Is that we both have an agreement that this communication is good, was good, or how do we distinguish a good communication going on?
I think there are different layers again, right? So it has cognitively on the mind, we have to both believe at least that we have come to the same result. If we had a meeting and the outcome is the same and we understand the same thing by it. In addition to feelings, I mean, it's a good communication if usually when I feel understood, when I feel safe, it's an unthreatening one. It gives you either a feeling of peace or of joy, but it's a positive feeling. I think that's what people usually associate with a positive result of communication. It might also be that you get the feeling that something was getting done, but then again, it's that kind of positivity. But to come to your point, I think when it comes to words are so tricky. I mean, my favorite example is, well, there are two. Okay, let's play two games. If you think, okay, we both think of I'm talking about trees, how wonderful trees are, and it's nice to be in nature. Now tell me, what kind of tree do you have in mind?
I go for the palm tree.
See, you go for the palm tree. Today I went for the birch, but sometimes I like willows. Maybe on the season it might be the Christmas tree. But in our communication, I just talked about trees. And depending on the setting, we believe we talk about the same things without being specific. Some people might argue this is semantics, but it gets more complicated the more, let's say, abstract or the more difficult it is to define a word. For instance, the word understanding, the verb, I don't know, how do you define understanding?
How do I define understanding? That you and I have a similar association of an object, an emotion, of something that we understand, but I don't want to describe understand with understanding, understanding with understand, that we basically associate similar specifics to an object or an emotion. But again, it can be so different, right? If we say, I see where you're going. I believe.
Yeah, see, you understood or not. I love this example because if you just look for the Cambridge Dictionary, just going with that, if I remember correctly, there are 5 different ways of how the word or the verb understanding can be understood. It can be, to know the meaning of something that someone says, like you understand an idea or somebody understands a foreign language. It can also mean to know why or how something happens or works, in the negative sense that we don't understand how the brain works completely yet. So this is, again, a different way of understanding. As you mentioned, emotions. So it could also be, to understand how someone feels or why someone behaves in a particular way. And now it's getting interesting for me, especially. Do you understand it from a cognitive perspective in the sense of, oh God, my examples are really intellectual today. You are having an ice cream and I hit you and I take the ice cream away. I don't hit you, but I slap the ice cream out of your hand and then you cry because we're starting with a level of 3-year-olds. Then someone who observes it understands why Ismail cries, or the child, because they were deprived or lost the ice cream. Or is it a personal, emotional, relatable situation in the sense of, oh yeah, I remember how I felt, so I understand, I empathize in this sense. And then there's the element of realizations. And, so basically just the word understanding has such different connotations, so many layers, and yet we use it so often believing, oh yeah, I understand what I mean by understand. So naturally you understand the same thing. And then in the end, we have a big confusion, because if I talk about something experience-based, which I use in my trainings, and you just do it cognitively in the sense of like a math equation, which admittedly I don't understand very often, they're just, it doesn't mix and match. So to get that attention, that awareness.
Because I believe to understand that we have this mismatch or this mislink quite sometimes, right? So we're talking about the same, but we may not talk about the same. So to which extent do you believe that it's important to clarify that? And can we always do that in our normal life? So say, okay, Muna, you have the understanding, a book is that. So if I ask you, what's a book?
I think that's the good thing about a book, is that most people you have a conversation about a book will have experienced having read a book, seen a book, then it makes it easier because we have a shared experience level. Again, if it gets to abstract ideas, and that's why vision quests and things for organizations are so interesting, because you get different pieces of a puzzle, and then you have to see how they all fit together, so it makes a sense. It creates a whole picture. For me, I think that's why active listening is so interesting. If you really want to understand the other person, it's not, or in a debate, it's the same. I love the quote. There's an Indian philosopher who once said, if thou winst or if you have won an argument, O eager disputant, thou is best to be pitied, because thou hast lost a chance for widening knowledge. By that, I understand in the sense of, we may disagree on an issue or a topic, but if I make the effort to understand why you reason the way you do, or why you argue, I will get insight into why you see the world you do, or understand a completely different perspective of things. It's like, what I like to do is, we have video, which is excellent. The people who are just listening to this will have to use their imagination and play along, and I have to be clear and precise with my phrases. If you fold your hands, like really, come do it with me. It's more fun. So which thumb is pointing towards you? Which thumb?
My left one.
Which is closest to you?
I would say my left thumb. Yeah.
Okay. How does it feel?
How does it feel? Actually, it's not the most natural position for me, but it feels all right.
Okay. And now open your hands and then fold them again, but this time consciously make it so that the right thumb is the dominant, or not the dominant one, but pointing to your chest. How does that feel?
Super weird.
Yeah. And I love that, because it's so simple. And basically, this is for me communication. I can't judge now, or maybe you can, which one is the right way to fold your hands. It's just, a different way of doing it. And then saying, okay, there might be situations, or there are definitely situations where one way of folding a hand is the practical way, if you take the metaphor further. But often in most cases, let's just start with the basics and try to understand, okay, you come from one perspective of your life, your journey, your experience, therefore you see the world in a certain way, and that's fine. And if I make the effort to understand that from with all the capabilities that I have, but to empathize, to put myself into your shoes, try to let go of my ideas how the world has to be, then I gain knowledge. And from that point, I think we can form a basis or a platform on which to build, and then create mutual understanding, develop things together which are more harmonious, because it decreases the need for conflict if we're willing to listen and understand each other.
No, absolutely. So I believe that this willingness is a big component. If you actually listen to the other person, then you can grow together. And then the question is like, how much do you clarify. I mean, this example we just played through, right? So we said, okay, we have this thumb and then it could be the other thumb. My idea earlier, just to jump back real quick, was if I would tell you, okay, I just read a book, the content of this book could also be super different, right? It could be like a literature book, it could be a novel, it could be a magazine, it could be about mathematics, it could be anything. But if I just say a book, it could also mean so many things, even though the object itself looks very different. But if we don't talk about what kind of book did I read over the past weekend, you may assume it was this novel that you are reading. I'm just making up this example, and you read a very similar book, but I was reading, I don't know, statistical whatsoever.
Yeah.
And if we don't clarify it, right? So
Exactly.
to which, if you talk about communication, and if you also, like with your clients or with other people, to which extent do you try to actively create this common ground and really go through, okay, this tree, if we talk about a forest, which tree do you talk about? Which tree do I talk about? Or how far is that, applicable and usable for everyday life conversations that we have?
Again, I think it's a dynamic that builds, right? So if you meet someone for the first time, or if I have a client for the first time, I really try to understand what is their goal, what do they expect if I give a training, or if it's a coaching or a facilitation of processes, whatever, so that I get their mindset. And if what usually helps is the technique of paraphrasing. So I'll repeat in the sense, oh, Ismail, so you said you read a book. It was a book on statistics. Did I get that right? And then you say, no, it was actually a romance novel. And then I say, thanks for clarifying. I love stereotypes. Sorry. But that helps from a basis. Naturally, there can still be misunderstandings along the way. But I think, as we said earlier, willingness or goodwill, if I come from a place of goodwill and can transfer that to the other person in the sense of, listen, I'm going to give it the best I can. Please be aware that there can be misunderstandings along the way, and I'm ready to apologize for something if I did misunderstand things. But if there was no malicious intent, I think that makes a difference, because we all know that things can go wrong, right? Or miscommunication happens. Generally, from my experience, especially when it comes to group dynamics and working with people over a longer period of time, it is essential to listen to the little things that make people uncomfortable. For instance, if we were in a business meeting and there's some strategy to be planned, and then there's one person who feels not heard, for whatever reason. And then you just say, okay, we've decided we'll go with person A. That's a great idea, and I don't care to listen to person C. Person C might say in the first, okay, fine, this is just it. But there will be a little voice, a little grain of salt or sand will stick into the mechanism, in the sense of, okay, I was not heard, I was not appreciated, I didn't feel seen, which some days might work fine, but give it a few months, weeks, years maybe, something similar happens. And then this part in our brain is re-triggered in the sense of, I knew that person has done that this time, so I'm going to be less willing to play along if I've not been included at the right time. So not smoothing sounds like so strategized or manipulating, but to really include everyone and make sure that consensus is really a consensus, in the sense of, this time we're going to go in a different direction. Do we all agree on that? Then that's it. Reduces obstacles along the way. That's at least my experience. So in day-to-day businesses, luckily to a certain extent, if you enter an organization, a culture, your day-to-day life, we know how basic things work, right? So if I go and buy a piece of bread, there's the clarification, what kind of bread do I want? That's Germany for you people. We have, I think, over 120 sorts of bread. I'm probably not even exaggerating. Anyway, so that is easy, right? So I clarify, but I wanted that part. And then I get it, I exchange money, and the deal is done there. It gets more complicated, I guess, the more abstract, the more pressure there is behind it, and the more stress. That's why in personal relationships, we believe we understand because it's a routine, but I understand you cannot have changed because I met you 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. and that's why, again, the need for inner awareness and giving the person, to allowing a person to change and to make sure, make an effort to see, okay, I'm really trying to understand you here. And the other person, again, with goodwill, being there and to say, okay, I get it. We misunderstood each other. Let's try it again.
Give each other that space also, no? And that trust. I think it also has to do with trust, that I trust that Nuna, even though she says something that offends me, did not mean it that way. And in the first place, I trust that we can have an open and direct and good communication. And then I feel heard and I feel good with Muna, so that I can tell her, you know what, this comment about this and that is something I didn't like, or I, as person C, speak up because the strategy that you guys created is good, but it's missing this and that component. So I think trust is a really big component if we talk about communication, and I don't know if we would call it open communication. So I don't know, is there ways to create trust? I mean, I believe, again, that you have a good trust relationship with your clients if you invest time. But if you do not know people so well, how can we create trust, and how can we create this playing field in a way that we actively do want to communicate openly?
I think it's, again, one level is always going to be discernment. Let's get that out. I think it's not to be completely naive. You can run around and be a happy-go-lucky person, and that works out well for you, or you just, ignore all your spider senses tingling and the warning signs. That would be then the naive part, which is not working out. So I believe discernment is, I'm a big fan of learning to differentiate and analyzing the situation. But generally speaking, I like the idea of, again, saying, accepting or going with the intention that the other person there is also from a place of goodwill. And that opens up already my way of being. Then there's a lot of talk about integrity these days in leadership. And for some people, it's not very clear what integrity means. For me, integrity is to talk the talk. And that's, again, something which establishes trust. So if you tell me, we are going to have a meeting on a certain day, and I show up and you are not there, then it'll be confusing. And then I have a choice. How do I communicate? Do I give you a call and yell at you because you stood me up? Or do I say, listen, Ismail, I'm a bit confused. Weren't we supposed to meet today? And then you say, yes, we were. And I apologize, but X, Y, and Z happened. And then I have an understanding. It's how do we deal with failure, perceived failure, or mistakes? All of these things, I think, play into the field of developing trust. And on the negative side is, how easily do I feel manipulated? Do I do things only for my own gain, or do I do things to get something out? And that's why I'm always a bit hesitant about this win-win strategy. Win-win is something I agree with, in the sense of that both sides should get something out of it. But I'm not good at calling it a strategy, because then it feels like you have an orange, I have an apple, we split it in half, and then each has, it's a very rational approach maybe. And I think, but I like the kindness component as well, because I think if we do things because from a different place, instead of just a rationality is not bad. It's helpful when you want to buy something and have a contract that clears things. But in human interaction, I do believe a certain softness and goodwill, as I said again, and trust, establishing trust by opening up as well.
No, absolutely. I think opening up is due to that trust that you and I have created. And if I miss that business meeting that you and I have scheduled, let's say, maybe it's this first grain of sand that you explained. And if I do it again and again, then you would say, okay, the next time you will maybe just not show up or not give me a call again. But if I can openly tell you, okay, my internet didn't work, or that and that happened, or my car broke down, whatever it may be, then you may trust me and you say, okay, this happens, and I have an understanding, and we just start a little bit later, right?
Yeah. But what I like is, I think that we work a lot more on trust than we are aware, because you said it in a way, if I trust you, then I can open up. But for instance, I trust when we meet for the first time and I don't know you and we have a business meeting, I trust that you are going to be there. I trust that you're going to be on time, as I trust the bus driver to take me to the direction where he says he's going to go. And that when I ring the bell, that he'll stop at the bus stop. He could just drive through for whatever reason. I don't know. But, we have a certain, it seems maybe silly to call it trust, but it's the way the world functions and we have experienced it, and that sort of builds on it. And I think it's interesting in especially in international communication, when it comes to signing contracts, that there are cultures that say, what, I first want to get to know you as a person before I'll sign the contract, because then I know if I can trust you, if we have a rapport going on, I feel comfortable with you, then I believe you'll be a good business partner. And then there are other countries that say, or cultures, no, I can't get to know you, because once I know you, I can't judge my judgment anymore. Trust my judgment, that's what I meant to say.
No,
So
it's very different approach on things, right? And I was about to say, for different cultures, where did you experience also different ways of communication and different ways of creating that trust? Because again, an assumption, I haven't been to Brazil. I actually have been to Brazil for 4 days, but I think in Brazil, it's very different to Russia, to Germany. How do people interact and how do people create this trust? Is there something that we can learn from different cultures, or is it again, not black and white, but that we can learn from each other if we have this base trust and this optimism?
I'll answer it differently, and if I lose track, please just point me in the right direction again. A friend of mine, he's Dutch. Years ago when I met him, I was a bit hesitant towards trusting him, and then he said, but there is no baseline. What is your baseline? Where do you come from that you're hesitant towards trusting me in certain fields? And then I thought, and it really stuck with me, because I thought, yes, you're right. I'm not trusting you as much because of experiences I had in my past, or from things I read about, or whatever. But you, as a single person, as an individual, have so far done nothing to deserve my mistrust. So, and then I made a conscious choice to say, okay, I will trust you. I might still be wary, but else, not shut off my spider senses or anything, but go along and see that I can trust you, and pay attention to first signs that I cannot trust that individual anymore. I think that it depends on cultures that are very different, because they don't form out of thin air, right? So you as a person, as an individual, are formed by your parents, by your environment, by how you were raised, the experience you made as an individual, all the filters with which you perceive reality. Then you're a part of a larger system, which can be company culture or group dynamics, which have an impact again. And then there's the larger part of the cultural area, how that influences you. And what I learned is that taking that leap of faith and trusting is not always easy, but it creates usually the most beautiful moments, that when you behave against that rationale. Again, I'm not saying that if the warning signs are there, you should pay attention to them. But I was traveling through Rajasthan because I wanted to visit and interview a project over there in the middle of nowhere. And in that part of Rajasthan, people don't speak English. I hardly have any practical Hindi. I can order samosas and chai, and that's the extent of it. So, and I can say my name, which is excellent, but it doesn't get you directions usually. And I was taking public transport, and then I was being the white woman, white girl. They put me in the public bus, but next to the bus driver, which is, I thought, I don't feel comfortable. Why I get special treatment? All of these things which made me feel uncomfortable. And then they offered me some food, and the person who checks your ticket, he smelled of alcohol, and I just thought, oh God, I'm traveling through a country and I don't speak the language, and I'm sitting on a bus. where I think the driver is completely drunk. I'm not sure, but his breath is telling me something. And then they offered me some food, and it looked like a sort of cherry variant. And I thought, okay, because this is me, other people are different, but I thought, okay, I know this is a sign of communication. This is a sign of going towards someone, offering someone and giving you a gift, even if you may not like it. And I can't communicate. So I felt I'll take it, and then I'll die or not, because I don't know what I'm eating, but that'll be an experience. So I took a bite, and I realized it was fruit, and it had gone bad. That's why it had this alcohol taste. It has been fermented, and that's why the bus driver had that taste. And I was so relieved. This has nothing to do with trust, but this was trusting in the sense of that they would offer me something nice, or trusting that they wouldn't drive drunk. And then later they offered me, they took a break. And again, he said, with just body language, stay close to me. We're going to take 5 minutes of a tea break, and then we're going to continue to drive. And we don't want to miss you sort of missing the bus. So you'll stay close with me. And that way, there were men I didn't know. I could not communicate with them. In other circumstances, I would be maybe more wary, but I thought, okay, this is, I'll keep an eye on the other passengers, but this seems like someone I can trust and work along with. But that is an experience. Traveling alone as a woman in India, I find a lot easier than in other countries, because then the dynamics are different, and learning that. But generally speaking, I think when it comes to one-on-one conversations and communicating one-on-one, I'd say perhaps people are more wary because of the experience they have made collectively as a country. When there are less options to share things, or when there is a lack of thing, or experiences a lack of thing, or there's a foreigner, or prejudices. These are all things I think I can handle. But when it comes to one-on-one experience, and you are open and show people an honest interest in them, I can't think that I've not been surprised at the generosity that I received back, the trust, the willingness to share, to open up. And that goes for personal conversations as well as in business situations. If I can honestly say that you've asked me because you need something, and you think that I can deliver that. So let's be honest about it, because if you expect something that I cannot deliver, then we're not a good match. But also, if you tell me honestly where your challenges lie, then I can do my best in order to solve this challenge. And I think, yeah, I'm a big defender of sincerity too. Oh dear Lord. There you go.
No, absolutely. And I think you're also really this optimist because you made a lot of good experiences like the one you just described. No? So what I hear is that for whichever reasons, for whichever experiences, your brain for a certain amount of time jumped to a conclusion. You smell an alcohol breath, you're in a car where you don't know people, it's guys, but you gave actively the trust to the people. And then you figured out that in fact, they were just very caring individuals, and they really wanted to make sure that you go to the direction that you go. So let's assume that this would have, not have clarified the way it did, and you would still assume that the driver was really drunk. And that happened not only once, but 5 times. So if there is a person, or if there is somebody that gave or that gives a lot of trust, and that again and again feels that this trust is misused, let's say, is there something that we can, or that you can share on how do you still open up, or how do you try to keep this open mindset? Because I believe, and that's an assumption because we've not met each other for a long time, but that you and I are really open-minded, that you and I are really people who believe in the good in people, because we've seen a lot of good in people. I can say that for myself, traveling the world, and you go to the most hidden corners of the world and you meet the most wonderful people if you just keep an open mind. But if you were not as privileged as you and I to encounter all those different cultures and emotions, and you are in a position that your trust was maybe misused, or that you just never created this openness, how can you work on that? And how can you start being more trustful, if you want to say?
What comes to mind is a quote by Martin Luther King, and I'm afraid I cannot quote it correctly, but the idea is that um, when you have faith or trust, you don't have to see the path, you just have to trust it's there and take the first leap. And this first leap is so challenging, to say, okay, all of my instincts are saying I shouldn't do A and B, but I know I have to break this pattern. From your example, I would say if it's the same person who's done it the same time, I would not trust blindly again. I mean, I've made the experience again working with international people, and this, well, it doesn't matter if it's international, not in working with people. And I was at the low end of the food chain in that company, and there was one person who was a famous German actor coming in. He wouldn't even say good morning when he entered my office, because there was no need for it, because I was at the end of the food chain. And I thought, that's fine, I'll still be polite towards you, but I won't be friendly. There's a little difference in the sense of I'll say good morning and I'll do whatever, if you have a question, I'm happy to help, and all of these things. But there's just a little pinch of salt that is missing in the soup, so to speak. And towards the end, because it was again a festival I worked at, he had changed, because he could pick up on the thing that I was very lively or communicative with other people, and there was a different bond that formed. So what I'm getting at is I would not, you don't want to be a doormat. That's, I think, the common expression. And I don't think it's helpful for you. I think it again comes to discernment. Is like, why do I want to give that trust to that person, even though I've made the experiences more than one time that that person lies or cheats or is not treating you fairly or with respect? And I think then there are two ways. Either you address it if it's an important enough conversation, or the person is on one way important enough to you to say, listen, I feel, because iMessages are usually more perceptible or easier to deal with, that this and this is happening, and I don't want to feel this way. Can we change it? I have a request. Can we, usually there's a nice model called clearing the air. It's a way of giving feedback. It starts with air is the action, I is the impact it had on you, and then R is the request you formulate. So saying, when you, Ismail, interrupted me, I felt unheard, unseen, triggered my whole past with my parents and the kindergarten teacher, whatever it is. That is sort of the impact, and I felt hurt. My request is, please ask if I'm finished even when I pause, or count to 5 before you want to express your side of the story, whatever it is. This is, again, a highly intellectual example, but I try to break it down to make it more tangible. If that person, if there's so much at stake in your relationship with that person, I think it's always worthwhile to try it. But it's also part of discernment and learning, as we human beings never cease to, always have enough experience, offered enough experience to do this. Learning means I cannot change that person. That person, I've made my request, that person behaves the way they do for whatever reason they do, and then to take a step back and say, okay, I can be polite if we can find a way to work together, but there's just certain realms. Let's say my enthusiasm to working with you has decreased from 100% to 70% or less, and I'm saying, okay, that's you and that's me, but then to find a way to connect to yourself and be true to yourself, and but that requires to know yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You need to know yourself, and you also, what you're talking about is you need to understand your trigger points and openly also bring them up and discuss them, right? Okay, like, Una, if you raise your left index finger, then I feel this and that because this and that happened. Or it could be anything, right? So to openly discuss trigger points, and they can be, again, so different. I mean, they can mean something for me, they can mean nothing for you. So if there is a person that you actually care enough about to openly bring that up and to say, okay, like, this is what it does to me, and I want to openly bring that up, and can we make sure, or what is your thought on that?
Yeah, and also just to that the other person can perceive. Maybe it's not even to for the other person to change, but just so that, you know, usually we encounter the same triggers in different shades of gray or green, whatever your preferred color is. And then that is usually a good sign if the same mechanism triggers you with different people, that it has something to do more with you than with the person who's actually pushing that button.
Mm-hmm. And how would you say, do you get a better understanding of yourself and of those trigger points?
Well, the easy questions have gone, and now we enter into the hardcore conversation. Excellent. How to become aware of yourself? I think it's there are little exercises we can do, you know, just to train our brain to develop this sense of inner observer, I'd call it. Sometimes, I don't know if you've had the experience, but let's say years and years ago, back in my youth, not that it happens recently ever again, that sometimes somebody cracks a joke and you laugh louder than you actually think it's appropriate, or something, there's something fishy going on, or you react, someone says something and you know you should laugh, so you laugh, but you actually don't find it funny. These are all the little experiences where I think the little observer is aware, and it's a sort of a soft voice usually that speaks to you, not the loud one shouting, and to try to develop to hear that. One really other nice examples, one is when you get up in the morning, this morning, when I assume you slept in bed or on a mattress at least.
It was a bad even.
Oh. But my assumption was correct. Yay me. Which foot hit the floor first when you got out of bed?
That was again left.
No, I'm very impressed that you're very aware of that. You know, for some people, it's usually very difficult because that's such an automatic thing. You know, you do something with your body, or I would say I always brush my teeth with the toothbrush in the right hand, but I could also use the left hand, simply to break a certain pattern in the way I'm doing or perceiving things. And that starts with the body usually, or physical experiences like folding the hands, what we did, but it triggers something that there is an aha moment of another level of understanding, this realization, oh, I could do things different, or what have I done, or to be aware of how you're sitting. Sometimes we get wrapped in conversations or meetings so much that we actually don't know, have we our feet crossed or not, but to develop that inner observer that can tell. And that is just usually an easier way, because you can check instantly with your body, oh, did I know what I did with my body or not? And then from there, take it to the emotional levels, that when someone says something and you feel an inner reaction coming up, usually it's the negative emotions we are we observe
most
easily.
aware.
Yeah, and then I would say, give it 5 seconds before you respond, you know, just not to instantly, but I told you I would not do this, why are you doing, whatever the mechanism is. Just to say, okay, 5 seconds, is this really my issue? Is this her issue or his issue? I mean, they say, when generally speaking, when somebody in communication, 60%, well, there's a 60-40% rule in feedback, but I would say it counts for most communication. You learn something about the other. Again, that's why communication is not, you want to be heard, you want to express yourself, but the other person wants to do the same. So if everyone is shouting, who is doing the listening? And if I take a step back and say, okay, Ismail said something, this happened in my brain. Is there a connection? Is this actually connected to Ismail as a person, or is he just a lucky person chosen to push my button on this day? And then it comes to discernment. It may be, yes, it is an issue with me that I carry, but it's also part of my learning process to learn to say, it takes courage and I don't feel comfortable, but I have to address it and take all my courage and say, oh, listen, Ismail, I'm not sure how to address this, but this happened.
And that makes good sense, and that triggered a different question of mine, or like they brought up a question. And I think the easy ones, it's really when stuff is getting emotional, right? You bring up this one topic and you say da 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 da, and I feel it, like my body temperature goes up. I feel like there's a certain urge to respond too fast. And this is, I think, the first layer, which is very obvious. And then we just talked about like crossing fingers, crossing hands. Is there also something that happens subconsciously as a mean of communication, if you want to say, which we have to learn to understand? So let's say, okay, whenever Muna does this and that, I start crossing my elbows and I listen to it, and it has different experiences, but I always cross my hands. So is there also a layer that's not as obvious, but that's our subconscious being tells us, okay, I don't agree with this and I should always listen to it because this is my cross hands. Is there some experience you can share on that, on subconscious understanding of yourself?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's always subconscious. In all honesty, I don't know, because when we talk about emotion, sometimes, like you say, you feel your body reacting, and this might, is this a consciousness thing, or is this already on a subconscious level? So I'm not quite sure. But breathing is usually a good thing to acknowledge. If you feel that something is happening with your breath. Usually gut reactions. I mean, we don't have these phrases for nothing, right? You feel it in your gut that there's something going off. With body language, I find it a lot, generally speaking, like crossing your arms or something is a lot trickier, because according to some theories, when it comes to body language, when you cross your arms, it's also a sign of feeling relaxed and well, that but it depends on how you cross your arms, so I find it difficult to make a general decision. And again, it comes to knowing yourself. If it's for myself, I think it's a dry throat can be a sign for me that I'm nervous. For instance, it doesn't mean that I can't do the job, but it's sort of, I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone here, and I feel performance anxiety coming up. That might be a trigger. That usually tells me, okay, calm down. It'll be fine. Then what's going on here? On a subconscious level, I might feel that I'm not ready to do the job. On another level, my brain is saying, you've done this, you can do this, or you're doing it for the first time, but you want to do it. It's, then there are two selves of mine there. I think there are more personalities in my brain communicating with each other. So I think it's on a subconscious level. I think it all comes down to awareness and again, that's why it's so tricky, because it's an individual thing. When it comes to learning to express something, that may be true for some people, but it may also be true the same thing, that if you are the person who always goes out shouting how you feel and request other people to behave differently, your learning process might actually be the opposite, to say, okay, it'll sit with me and I'll work it out for myself, but I don't have to overshare or make everybody part of my process, and to learn that balance, and not to compare yourself with others, because you've had different experience than I did. There might be some correlation, or we realize that it is good for us to, or helpful to do things in a certain way that helps our inner growth. That might work very well, but another person or in a different situation, we have to learn the exact opposite. Just to give you, and then the monologue will stop. But a recent example is that I was part of a group where I realized, it took me a long time that the group dynamics didn't suit me.
Okay.
And now,
what is a long time, just to get an understanding?
For me, it was about half a year, 3/4 of a year, or something. I mean, we met only once a week, so it's not and it's online, digital, so it's a different setting again. However, and there's another person, and we feel similarly about the group dynamic. And I realized for myself, I have to leave the group, because this is for me a challenge. Because it means I feel I have to exclude myself. I'm not part of something and I want to belong. And I thought they might be the right tribe for me, and all these thoughts. But for me, the process was to say, I have to take a step back. And it was a lot. I mean, this was part of the 3/4. sort of realization. The other person said, no, she wants, for her, it triggers similar things, but she wants to learn to be herself, despite the fact that she's in a group where she feels not that she doesn't quite fit in. And that's for you as an individual to decide. And it might be at different moments, different learning paths you have. You know, you can't just separate it or give a general rule. If the group is not right for you, you have to leave. It might be that you have to handle that, you know, whatever your growth process is. And I can't judge that. I just can point at it, push buttons, and no. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it would be interesting to understand to which extent did the two of you share your emotions about the group dynamics with this group? I don't know how big this group was, but where was the group aware that you and the other person got triggered and didn't feel, I mean, I guess on a subconscious level, they realize it over, if somebody doesn't feel so well about for 3/4 of a year, they will have sensed something. But did you openly communicate and say, okay, this and that from this group environment triggers me? Or how openly did you discuss that?
I don't know about her, because she joined a little bit later and I've not been part of this group very much anymore, only very selectively. I think for me, I did mention it a couple of times to sort of the group leaders indirectly. I've mentioned it once in a group setting or twice, and people don't react on it. And that's, for instance, one sign for me why the group dynamic doesn't work for me. If you want, it depends what you want out of a group. And there were several instances over this rather long period in my experience where I realized, you want different things, and that is completely fine. You don't need to change your group dynamics, but I have to take myself out of this because it's not a healthy environment for me. It's not what I want from a group. It's not how I like to see the world. It's interesting. It was probably my clearest experience with, I forgot who it said, maybe you know, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah, exactly. That's what one says.
Yeah. And I realized, I mean, they were not the 5 people I spent the most time with, but having spent so much time regularly with them, and it was during the lockdown, so there was less interaction outside, I realized how some behavioral patterns I started to adopt to them. And I thought, but no, this is not a way I like to communicate in this group setting. Luckily, not that I would take it somewhere else, but within that group. And I thought, this is an interesting learning experience. I've learned that, and now I have to take a step back and another step back so that I'm true to myself and not get swallowed up by their dynamic. And they can have their dynamic, and that's fine.
So also to understand at a certain point, and again, be honest and true to yourself, that this is not the development curve that you are anticipating, that you are looking for in a group environment. But it would also be interesting, you said like that it was not the people that you would like to hope to see the world. So in terms of having different opinions or different approaches in a group setting, what is the positive and the negative maybe, or what is all these different shades of gray of communicating with people that do not have the same opinion on thing A, emotion B?
But I think that's again, the differences are as always, do you meet people privately? Do you meet them in an organization? Do you meet them because your boss makes you meet them? You know, they're all the different dynamics, and then subgroups form. Group dynamics is a whole different topic. I think it depends. I mean, you can, again, what is the goal? Is it in a work environment where we have to reach a common understanding? Then I think it's worthwhile to continue to communicate, or to at least, it's not necessary to agree on all things. I think that would be asking too much, and then everyone thinks the same. That's a weird world, and I wouldn't want to live in that. But if a decision has to be made, usually there's one person in charge, or it takes, if it's not one person, but a group decision, then it usually takes more time. But also to be willing to say, and that's what I consider part of consensus, is, okay, I see the world differently, but for this, I'm happy that if from 5, we're 5 people, I'm the only one who disagrees, and I've stated my issues or why I think it's the wrong path or whatever. Twice I've been heard, and still people, and by heard I mean they really listened and tried to understand my point of view, and then they say, but we still think we have to take that risk or go down that road. That I then say, okay, I'm part of a group, so I take a step back from my opinion and say that's fine. But again, it comes to discernment to say if it's really going down the rabbit hole and creating havoc, then maybe speaking up twice is not enough, but making it a real clear point, and then to let go, because I think there's a lot of ideas about being in control, which is a nice story we tell ourselves, but there's a lot more happening which we can't control. And so in a group setting, I don't know, what group setting did you have in mind?
To be really anything. No, I think, as you say, there is a big distinction between friends, between work, because between the mixture of both, which can also happen, that you work with your friends, between someone you really care about or someone you barely care about. I think you have all those different layers and all those different dimensions. No? But I sometimes find it very fruitful to discuss a particular topic with someone who really does not have the same opinion, because it also helps to hear each other out, right? Just because Muna thinks about this topic A completely differently, I trust that you have your sound opinion on something, so I can learn something by hearing it out. It doesn't mean that by the end of the conversation, you and I must go home and have the same opinion. You can still have your opinion, I can still have my opinion, and we can both have learned. And maybe I had 10 bullets in mind and you gave me another 2. Or I got rid of 3 because they are not valid for me anymore, right? So I think it's very interesting to talk to people and to surround yourself also with people who are not necessarily from the same bubble, who are not necessarily believing in each and everything that you believe in. Because if we start just mingling with the people that have the very same opinion on things, obviously, I mean, if we go back to the example of the 5 people, then we all believe on topic A that this is the way to go, but maybe it's really not, because the other 95 people from our sample are really not in the same opinion, right? And I think this is something that lately happened a lot, that people stick with people that have an opinion that they want to believe or that they want to have. And then it can also, I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but it can take a dynamic which is certainly not beneficial if we talk about consensus and if we talk about truth. I think this is something for me that I try to value truth as the highest outcome or possible outcome of a conversation. And I know there's not only one truth, but if we both believe, okay, like I can learn from Muna and Muna can have her opinion and her story, and then I can take whatever I believe is true about her opinion. And you can say, okay, maybe Ishmael has a very different understanding of things, but what he said about those 3 examples, they actually do make sense. And then this is the common learning experience that we can have. And I think this is also something that can change something within you and within me.
Definitely. I very nicely put. I wouldn't disagree. So we have an agreeing point here. But it's, yeah, shoot, we didn't want that. But it's the thing also to be willing to step out of your bubble, right? And sometimes I wonder, or I know that we seek similar people because it enhances our idea and identity of ourselves, right? Because then I don't have to question my opinion. If you are telling me something completely different, that would challenge me in my point of view of the world and my understanding of reality. And if that might be triggering in on various levels, so it might be more comfortable or more empowering actually to stick and talk to people who see the world in a similar way. It's and then again to find a balance for everyone, where you say, okay, I will talk and have conversations or accept different points of views, and there might be just some topics where I'm saying that's fine that you see the world differently, but I will not agree to that and I cannot agree to that. And again, it might be also we disagree on 3 different topics and we say we will never see eye to eye on that, but then make an effort to say, okay, we don't agree on A, B, and C, but the alphabet has more letters. Then maybe we find a different topic where we can agree and then develop that bond. And then I know, okay, when it comes to cooking, Ismail and I just, this will never be a friendship. And it's good that we live in currently different places, so we are never forced to work in a kitchen together. That's fine. But when it comes to taking care of plants, he's a great guy. I can learn from him, to differentiate and not to expect one person to be everything or fit into your frame of reality.
Out of curiosity, is that something, I mean, you said you joined this group environment and you understood that the expectations you had, or like that this group environment was not for you. But is that something that you actively seek? Do you experiment and do you say, okay, like, let's leave my bubble by doing this and that, or let's go and explore a very different school of opinions or something? Is that something that you actively do, or is that something that just happens because you also work in that field? Or
I would say it's a mixture. I think I'm naturally curious, and if an opportunity presents itself, I usually say yes, or I listen to my gut feeling. If I feel that this is something I would not, they're different, people are different, right? And I think it's important to seek out experiences that enhances us but don't threaten us, because if you're in a constant panic mode, then all of your senses will shut down into survival mode, and there is just flight response usually, and nothing to be gained. There is Daryl Davies. He's an American blues musician, amongst other things, and he's done documentary and written a book about his experience, because he's a very tall, big African-American musician. And for some reason or other, he ended up having conversations with KKK members. And through his conversation, he made a difference. And the whole point is that then he was able to have a conversation and questioning their assumptions of things, in the sense of, okay, I'm making things up now. All African Americans are X and Y and Z, lazy people. And then he said, but do you perceive me as lazy? And I said, no, you are an exception. But how? And that's how, the conversation developed, and something happened. And I think, and that's what he says about himself, because he's a big person, there's a physical security about him, which means that he doesn't feel physically threatened, which is, I think, one element why he felt called to do it, or, it came from within. If you were asking me to have a conversation with someone from the far right or ultra right or any extremist, I would really have to think if I wanted to put myself into that situation, because yes, that person has a very different point of view, and that might be valid from his experience or not. I don't want to go into that part of the discussion, but I don't know if I would feel comfortable enough to do it. I know that from riding on a train can always be illuminating. I had to take a small train through a rougher part of Germany, let's put it that way, and in the former West. And there was a person entering that local train, and he started to talk to the guy behind me and saying, well, he would like to exchange ideas on Nazi and Aryans, and how this is the right path for the world, and la-di-da, and if that other man is interested in having the conversation. The man declined, and then that was fine, and then the person moved on. And I thought, oh, naturally, I'm going to be next. Well, I wasn't next, because I'm a woman, and with women, you don't have these conversations into a certain mindset. Because I was really wondering, am I going to say yes or not? I don't know how I'm going to react. Anyway, I was spared that decision, and he spoke to the next man, and he was happy to have that conversation. And I eavesdropped for about 3 or 5 minutes, and then I thought, I have to leave now. If I don't leave, I will open my mouth in a way that is not productive. It might put me into a dangerous situation, but I can't stand listening to this conversation, and I'm taking myself out of it. That was my decision for my mental health, for my safety, whatever you want to call it. Other people will say, no, it was a good point, because then they felt that was the opportunity to speak up. I speak up in different places and situations, but I need to have you need to take care of yourself as well. Otherwise, there is a disbalance, and it doesn't work. And usually what happens, according to neuroscientist Gerald Hüther, for instance, is it's not so much courage when you speak up, but it's an inner drive. You just do it because you know you can't not do it. And I don't know if you've had experiences like this, but there are situations where other people would say, oh, I don't know, how could you speak up? I was way too scared, and I don't mind. And then there are situations where I'm like, I'm very grateful that there are other people who have that power.
No, absolutely. I think you have to understand when is your time or when is not your time to speak up, right? And there's environments where you can or cannot do so. Yeah, I heard about this guy and the KKK. There's actually like a book I recently read. It's like Adam Grant and Think Again. They also talk about it. I believe it's an example. They talk about it more often because it's something super courageous to do. And he changed quite a few people that then partially also actively walked against the KKK. I just want to put it. But I mean, there's few examples that come to mind that sometimes, yes, you are the person to speak up, and you are the person to say something and to give your opinion. And I believe sometimes to certain topics, you don't have an opinion. Yeah, let's take this. Okay, there is the far right person, and probably you and I have an opinion on that, but maybe it's not the right time or not the right environment to speak up. But there might also be a conversation that people are very emotional about, that you and I frankly don't care enough about it, no? And then we are also not in a position. So I think it's, again, super individual. It's like, okay, how did you grow up? Do you care if somebody insults this group or this nationality or whatsoever, or do you not care so much because it's something very common for you? And yeah, when is the time to speak up and when is not? And now you jump in.
It's my time to speak up. No, not that I haven't done that enough, but it comes again to awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to know yourself, and it's again an individual decision. It might be one day, taking that train example, I had to take myself out of it. It might be the next day I feel different, that I say, no, now is the right time. So that I find it important to question yourself, in the sense of not just, oh, I never do this, so I've never done this, I'll never do it, or this is always dangerous, because I don't think it fits. You have to check, okay, I feel ready now, or I usually learned that in a certain setting, I don't mind questioning authority figures, and I might do it in a way that people listen, or, well, it creates a scene, not intentionally, but it has happened. And then that's something where I felt, okay, but this is me and I have to express that. And then there are other settings where I don't. And it's just, for me, important to be aware, and not just to fall into a mechanism again, or to demand of you to act the way I see right. The only thing I can ask, I think, is to be aware that you question yourself, in the sense of a raised awareness. When should I speak up or not? Recently, I read an article, or just basically the gist of it, which said, that people in leadership positions should speak out more often, and not, quietly accept certain things. And I agree to that, but I also say, but it's not only about people in leadership position. It's everyone. It's, you can. And again, I'm not judging it, but it's again an individual choice. If, for instance, you're in a situation where you feel that there's chauvinism, patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, at place, then you can say, okay, it's only 18 more months, I will push through, and then I have never to see the person again, but I get my degree, certificate, or whatever, or experience I
whatever
want.
it may be.
It's a legitimate decision. Or you can say, I want to change that because I might suffer now, but at least it might change something in the long term for someone who comes after me. That's also legitimate. I think the least helpful choice is to stay in the same position and just to complain, because by that it just drags your energy down. And I'm not saying that it's also a process. It might be necessary for you to complain for 2 weeks or 2 months until you realize, and you have, complain so much that you get tired of hearing that side of your voice, and then something shifts. But you cannot escape that awareness. That's at least my perception of life through my filters and my experiences.
To accept this awareness and then do something about it, right? So understanding, okay, this doesn't trigger me at all, so I don't have to do something about it. Easy. But if something triggers you again and again, let's just stick with this example, and you go into the train, and this guy takes every day the same train, and the first day it triggers you, and the second day it triggers you even more, and maybe on day 5 you would have done something and talked to him in an open way, because now you feel like you could, and you listen to his arguments 5 times, and you prepared yourself on how to talk to it. Or the first time it triggers you a lot, and day 2 you really don't care, and then day 5 you don't even hear it anymore, right? But to have this understanding of yourself that if something really triggers you, you are the only one who can do something about it. And do something is, again, so many different things. You can talk to it, you can decide to not take the train but the bus, you can do so many different things, right? But you are the only person in control, and you are the only person who feels this emotion or feels this trigger point. And if something is strong enough to trigger you, you most likely are good in doing something about it, right? And if it doesn't trigger you, then who cares?
Yeah, and I think it's not an easy thing. I'm not, we speak of it lightly maybe, but another experience comes to mind when I worked at a company. Oh, let's not get into that detail, but the result was that so I had signed a contract, and usually I feel very dedicated. It feels like I want to do this, and it was not as a freelancer, but I was hired. So I thought, no, but this is a part of me, and I'm dedicated. I want to fulfill this contract on my part. And at the same time, I felt that the company was lying. So I did not agree with their perspective on life and business. And, we had different values, let's put it that way. And again, I did not feel comfortable going into that work environment. And it took me, I think, 2 months until I had the courage to step towards my boss and tell him, listen, I'm not saying, and I was very careful. I said, listen, I'm not saying that we all have to lie in order to work in this company, but I have to lie in order to deliver the numbers you want to have. So I'd really like to cancel, our working relationship. And that, the night before was such a struggle for me, because there were 2 voices. This deep sense of commitment on the one hand, and at the other time is like going against my grain by lying. And then these were just the 2 choices I had. So either I have to stick with my sense of commitment because I feel that is more important, or I had to say, no, for me, it's more important to live or work in an environment where our values align. And then, as I said, it was a big struggle, but in the next morning, and it took me a lot of courage, because I felt I was going against a part of myself. And it was not easy, but it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, because it builds my inner strength, because I stick towards, what I believe in. And I'm happy to give you commitment, but I'm not giving you commitment at any cost.
Now, I was about to ask, like, how did it develop this situation? Because usually, and this is again only speaking for myself as well, yes, it can be super painful to go into this communication and to tell Muna that those 3 characteristics, that those 5 traits are something I really don't like, or that this triggers me, and so forth. So it can build up, like for days, for weeks, for months. But usually, and again, this is my very personal experience, once you put it out there, people receive it in a nicer way, and then you will find a solution. And this solution could be, okay, let's not talk again, ever again, but we agree to hardly disagree, and it will, for both sides, be usually the easier way forward than trying to find common ground, which we just really don't have. So it can be, super frightening, and you can be very anxious about speaking up, about doing this step. But for what I've learned for myself is usually it is the right step. If something inside of you, there is this calling, okay, I have to solve this, I have to fix this, I have to bring it up. Because if you don't, it really hurts yourself. And if you're aware of hurting yourself, this can lead to a whole different consequences we may not touch ground on. But I think this is where it really comes down, like understand that triggers me. And then, yeah, this might be difficult, but I don't want to avoid this, but I want to openly change something about the situation.
Yeah, if it is something, as I said, again, the discernment, if this is the situation as you described, then yeah, go, use yourself, try to be kind to yourself in that way, and empower yourself in that way. And it's not an easy process all the time. And at the same time, there might be things where you think, okay, actually it's not necessary to do it, and that's fine too. But to develop this inner awareness and sense of, yes, I'm scared a lot and I don't feel comfortable doing this, but I need to do it. And I've had those experiences, and like everyone, and I remember that one time, looking back at it now, I know that I did back then the best I could by speaking up. Being the person I am now, I would say this was not enough. You should have stormed with all flags raised and yelled at everyone because you really should have made a different point. But I wasn't there yet, and that's okay. I learned from that experience, and I did the best I could in the way I could for speaking up for myself, and everything else develops over time. I mean, we're maybe physically built and then the grown-up person, but there's always room for learning and growing within, whether we like it or not.
Absolutely, lifelong learning. And what I'm wondering, is there tools or techniques that you somehow use or can share with the audience? I mean, a super easy one also, like if I talk to people and they're unsatisfied with their career, it's like, okay, you take a pen and a paper and you say you have two columns, and one is I like the day and one is I don't like the day, and you for the next 30 working days make just I don't know, a circle, draw a circle. And if in the end I don't like the working day is 29 to I do like the working day 1, you may or may not fix something, or you may or may not change something about it. So is there easy ways or easy steps that you do for yourself to really listen to this awareness? I believe that you are nicely aware of things and listen to it easily, but is there things that we can share with the communities that are easy ways to create a better awareness of your thoughts and of your emotions?
When it comes to decision making, or how do you mean?
Decision making or trigger points. It could be decision makings. It could be.
That's interesting. Because I usually work on such an individual level, then it's more difficult, right? But what I like is adopting the circle of influence to a personal experience. The circle of influence is again a leadership concept where you for those who don't know, you write down what is in your influence and what is, and then you go further out and out. But while it works for business decisions, it works as much for your own self, especially when you have challenges in your day-to-day interaction. And it might be I had once a choleric boss, and in my circle of influence, she's not, I can't control her outbursts. This is but what can I do to feel better about it, and to be aware of that I'm capable of saying, okay, I can still greet her friendly and be polite and or be professional, and or not to take things personal might be a thing of decision. To become aware of these different mechanisms, I think it's really starting small. As you said, what is also a nice thing is gratitude, because it gives it into the positive thing. Write a list or mention 3 things for which you're grateful at the top of your head. Focus on things how you would like to feel, instead of repeating to yourself, I feel shitty, I feel shitty, I feel shitty. It's like, no, I want to feel joyful and I want to feel optimistic, because it does something to your brain. It changes the outlook. But of course it means that you are aware of how things are not, how you're not happy. But I think it starts with sincerity, and human beings have a great capacity of bullshitting themselves. And I mean this with a lot of love, and I know I'm part of it, that instead of, admitting that I struggle with or this is challenging for me, I can tell myself nice stories, and to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, this is okay, I am that way, and I learn that, and to acknowledge that, or to write down something you would like to have or to be different. And maybe what usually happens is, I'd say, we're a lot focused on outer things, in the sense of who do we want to be. I want to be a successful manager or podcaster or communication trainer or whatever it is. But it's also, who do I want to be as a person? I want to be kind, and I want to be joyful, and I want to have nice communication, and I want to listen to others. I want to respect others, because I do believe that the way you treat the world around you, it somehow comes back to you. It might not be the same person, but then from a different angle. So to cut again a long monologue short, I'm not sure I can answer your question.
But I think you did, and you raised a lot of very, very good thoughts. No, I really do like the different perspectives on communication and what we looked at, and also like of self-awareness. I think, again, it boils down to self-awareness and to listening to your gut feeling. And yes, rationality is something good, but if your gut tells you that something is not going the right direction, usually it's good to listen to it. When was the last time, Una, that you listened to your gut against rational thought?
No, that's a good question. What I like that, because you mentioned the list, I realized that sometimes I get the advice to do a list, and it's fun to do the list, but I know in the end I will always listen to my gut. And maybe there's another, I'm not answering your question, I'm aware of that, but I like especially when it comes to a yes or no decision, there are two ways, very similar. People do it with a coin. I prefer paper, so I write yes and no to a question on separate pieces of paper, fold them up, do my own thing, forget about it, and then whenever, after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, the next day, I say, okay, no, I'm ready, and then I pick the paper, and then I'll do what it says. And then it's really interesting, because sometimes the paper says no, and then I'm like, but no, I really want to do it. Then it gives you that clarity. Or it says no. I was like, I really want to do it, but I think the paper is right. Again, it comes to that, again, not bullshitting yourself in the sense, but I want it so much, but to accept that maybe there's a soft voice within my head that actually tells me it is in my best interest. So it's been actually a while since I've done that. As I said, I usually go with my gut. I think I always go with my gut, so I'm not sure. Yeah.
Fair.
I'm a gut person.
Same. I think very similar in that regard. And with those papers, if you then feel, okay, no is not the right decision, you feel that this no is a yes, or it should be a yes, do you then go for yes? To change?
It depends.
Or do you stick with
it depends on the situation. Again, I think it comes to discernment. Either it gives you the clarity in the moment saying, so I actually want yes, and I wasn't aware of that. Sometimes it happens that I say, I need 3, I will do it 3 times, and whatever is then the rational majority, then democracy comes into my house. And then I say, okay, it's been twice. No, I really wanted a yes, but it does not seem to come. And then there is a trust in the world. It's not a rational approach for most people. It's, for me, a very rational approach to trust the paper, that the paper is right.
Very good.
And yeah, it's not always easy then, to disregard that instinct, because it's usually again the loud voice telling me that it wants something, and then there's usually the smaller, the softer one, and says like, might be okay not to do it actually, and then I'm like, fine, I'll listen to the soft voice.
No, but I mean, in the end, you set up this experiment or this procedure for a certain reason, right? If you're super clear about yes or no, then you would just go for yes or no. So if you just tell yourself, okay, in 3 days, I will take the decision because right now I cannot, and I will listen to the paper queen, the universe, whomever decides if it's going to be a yes or no, then this is a rational decision to go with that experiment or with the outcome of whatever comes.
I love it. I'll keep that. If I teach that or share that method, I will call it the paper queen method. I think that's very nice.
Super nice. Very well. We've talked a lot about communication. We've talked a lot about consciousness. We talked a lot about change. Is there something that we didn't talk about and that you would like to take some time for?
I'd like to point out, because it's so important to me, I don't know about you, but that this consciousness, communication, change, how they're just linked to one another. And we usually, consciousness is a big word. It's, I think, easiest explained with a certain awareness. I think it's more than that, but for the sake of argument, let's call it awareness. You have to be aware in order to change anything. If you're not aware, things don't work. And usually in order to change things, you need to communicate. Again, we come to the point of you cannot not communicate. And I find it, once that really settles in and becomes an experience in the sense of, it's true, if I ignore your email, I'm still communicating. I'm communicating that I'm ignoring you for whatever reason. It may be malicious intent, or I just did not have time yet. But it's such a process. And I also like, I don't know whose quote that was. I came across one where a person said, you can read as many books as you like, but if you cannot read yourself, it doesn't work. That there are concepts that work in the sense of how to fill out an Excel sheet or something, or formulas that might work because it's very nitty-gritty, down to earth. But generally speaking, with everything that comes to personal development, when it comes to communication, when it comes to change in the sense of change management in an organization, group dynamics, coaching, individual interactions and relationships, in with coworkers, with bosses, with subordinates, whatever it is all linked together. And I think it's so important if we once I got that, it's everything was, there was a clarity to it. It's still challenging to put it into practice, but it's a good way to start. Otherwise I'm twisting and turning just one cog of the wheel, and it's not working, but it's all interlinked. And that makes me very happy. I don't know why, just to see the connectivity between things. Another C word, there you go.
No, the interconnectivity of things, right? And what I also choose to hear in what you are saying is that one should start with oneself to understand and to have this awareness, this consciousness, and only then we can aim bigger, if you want to say. So I'm not trying to change you, but if I understand myself, if I change for myself, then this may or may not change the society I live in, or change the culture that I live in, or change the religious beliefs in the group of people that I'm in. But it always, and maybe you can clarify that this is the correct understanding, it always starts with oneself, and with listening to yourself, with accepting the thoughts, the emotions that are within you. And only if you actually do listen to yourself, you can go on that journey and eventually, maybe or maybe not, change something greater, if you want to say.
Yeah, it is. And it is linked, right? Because if you are aware of yourself, usually means that something outside of yourself is triggering you. There's some conversation that stays with you, or you read an interesting book, and that's out of you or your persona. And then so it is always you're interconnected to outward experiences, but then again, change comes from within. And I don't believe that I can change anyone else, because that would be very powerful. But to have the willingness, if I'm willing to see things from a different perspective, it might change me. And as you said, then it can have an impact, or you see how things have always been done and you question the way things have always been done, and then you say, okay, I'm going to try it a different way because I feel that I have to do it, not because someone tells me to do it, but that's my calling. Why should I, to step out of whatever perception we have life should be, and think of ideals and how life could be, and give it a shot. And it usually starts with oneself. I do have to say that I'm always amazed when, like we did the example of getting out of bed with which foot. There are similar examples with, stick to one thought and don't think about anything else for a minute. It's similar to a concentration meditation exercise. How difficult we find these things. When I usually tell my participants or clients, so you find that difficult, and it's just 1 minute and it's just you who has to do it. Who is in control of you? That's you. Usually that's what we say. You cannot do this, but yet you have the idea that you can change a whole company, have an influence over whoever. It's a very interesting world, and I do believe it starts with oneself, and then it has good repercussions. It goes out into the world and makes a difference.
And I believe also understanding or starting with yourself, that you are in a position to rethink your beliefs, your thoughts, and your strong opinions, right? If I do not accept that what Muna says may change me, if I go into this very conversation and I say, this is my opinion and my way is the highway and I'm not going to change anything about it, then probably there's no point in having this conversation. But if I accept and say, okay, if Muna has good arguments, well, then I will listen to them and then I will rethink my position. And only if we accept that rethinking is something that happens all the time, or that can happen all the time, we can develop, right? And I believe there's also a few topics, at least for myself, I don't know if there's something that comes to mind. If I would ask you, like, what is a belief or what is an opinion that you wouldn't like to rethink? Probably there's a few things coming up, right? Is there something that you would want to share, could share?
So you mean a belief I wouldn't like to think to change? Okay, then the belief would be I am enough is something I would not want to change.
Okay.
Or a belief that if I know, and this comes back to sincerity, if I've done my best, who is there to question that? Who is there to tell me that I'm not enough or did not do a good job? That might be their perspective, but I know I gave it all that I had. Or to say, be kind to yourself. I think that's something that resonates with me. There is, I think also in the belief that I do firmly believe that we can help and support and uplift each other. It might not always be in the obvious way, in the sense of it doesn't mean that I have to be a good Samaritan all the time. Takes different situations require different things, but generally speaking, I do believe that we can achieve a lot more by collaboration and working together than through competition.
Absolutely. And I would sign all 3 bullets you just used to summarize, and I really love it. There's 3 questions, Muna, that I ask each and every of my guests, but before we go there, you're also the host of 2 podcasts. Where can people find out more about you if they are interested, which I am sure they are?
Oh, that's very sweet. Yes, I do the monologues, which you've got a bit of a taste in the sense of it's called the monologues kind of thing. It's the monologues, Hello World, Hello Change, where I either present stories or have interviews, conversations with people, initiatives, and organizations that bridge the difference, that try to reach out and meet the other in order to develop an understanding of someone who is very different. The next episode, for instance, that will be aired was with Roots of Empathy, which is an organization in Canada that works with children in order to break the circle of violence and to establish empathy as a superpower, as I would say it. And you can find these and other episodes on the Moonologues, which is www.moonologues, like monologue, but moona.com. And the other one is a very different style of podcast. I do it together with my friend Alex. It's called The Cynic and the Optimist, and we talk about everything. But with thought and entertainment, we hope. So we've covered topics such as, what did we have? Hedonism. We had lifelong learning. Oh yeah, the next one is going to be convenience kills. And there will be, in the long run, one on cats and other narcissists. So you see, we have a broad spectrum, but we try to offer food for thought in an entertaining way, just because we disagree on most things. So it's two opinions, and you can mix and match and see what helps you. And you find us at cynicandoptimist.com. And yeah, give us a listen, drop by, give us suggestions for both or either podcasts. And of course, you can find me at www.moonawagner.com. So
wonderful. And I will
LinkedIn.
link all that, and I can highly recommend both of the podcasts, really. I think they are very different, which is super cool.
Yeah.
And they cover in a very entertaining way, both of them, very interesting and good topics. So I really liked listening in to both of them. There's a lot of anecdotes, a lot of thoughts that come to mind. So go check them out. I will link them to the speaker notes. And yeah, thanks for what you are creating. I think it's really wonderful and it's really lovely. And with that,
thank you.
With that, the first one that I would be interested in is what, Moona, influenced or motivated you in the past week?
This will take a minute because every week is different in my life. So it's not like I have to quickly check what happened in the last week, and then I'm sure I can tell you what influenced me, motivated me. Oh yeah, I'll take this one. So for an upcoming event, I had to find musicians to offer a little concert, and I asked a friend of mine, and so I got into touch with Humam, who is a Syrian guitar player, talented musician, and he has a band of 3 people consisting of a German and Iranian musician and himself a Syrian musician. And we just had a lovely conversation, and I was very touched because it was open. The conversation was open. It was direct in the sense of what do you offer? What can you offer? What can we pay? And that was just, this is the way I like to work. So it was very motivating, and I'm looking forward to booking them and continue to be in touch with them.
I love it. And that sounds super interesting. And I'm super happy that music and art is happening again. And that sounds like you guys gonna have a very, very nice event, concert, whatever it's gonna be. Super nice. Thanks for sharing that. The second one would be, who, Moona, are your mentors and whom do you look up to?
How many may I mention?
All of which come to mind.
Okay, it's 4.
Okay.
I thought 3. There will be 4. The first is my mom, because she was a single mom. She raised 2 kids on her own, and she worked full time. And I'm just very much impressed of what a strong woman she is. How much she was always there for us. She worked a lot, but I never lacked in anything. Money wasn't always there in the sense of in affluence, but just a shout out to all single moms, single dads, single parents in general. I'm very impressed with their work, and I'm totally in awe. Then the second one goes in a completely different direction, is Martin Luther King. I don't know. I love his foresight. I love how he. There's another quote where he says, it all comes down to connectivity. and just talking about it, I get goosebumps because I just think there is so much truth in it. And as long as we don't see that connectivity, then will always be obstacles. And maybe that's why it's so important to me to establish this link. The third one is an Indian philosopher or a spiritual guide named Sri Aurobindo, because so far I've not had a question he was not able to answer through his teachings. I mean, he has passed, but so and he has helped me in my personal growth in practical ways. I was prone to nightmares, so there's practical side to it which have changed through that. So yeah, he's definitely among the top mentors, if we would like to call it mentors. And the fourth one, where these three were there instantly, but the fourth one I've decided are little children. I love little children because they're very honest. They see you for who you are. Little children, and I mean years, maybe until they're 3 or 4, depending, and sometimes until 7. But generally speaking, they're very honest. They're very sincere. They play, but they don't. They try to figure out their boundaries and see how far they can push you. But it's usually not with malicious intent. And I just like playing with them and having a ball and being the crazy aunt. That's definitely one thing that keeps me motivated.
No, absolutely. And you just opened so many segues for a potential second podcast episode with Muna. And I love it. Now it's really great, inspiring. I mean, we share a single mom. So also, like, from my side, all the shout outs there are. Sri Aurobindo, obviously, we also both have a connection. So that's also super interesting. Martin Luther King and kids. I mean, I don't want to bore each and everybody with so many stories, but I mean, I have 2 nephews and a niece, and spending time with them, and especially experiencing something for the very first time in the life of a kid is something super amazing. I've talked about that few times before, but if with the kids, it's just so amazing. If something happens the very first time in their life and you are there, as you said, they are so honest, so direct. So yeah, I understand those mentors a lot. Very beautiful. And that brings me to the third question, Muna. I call it the alien scenario, or the 3 truths. So imagine you're traveling in space all by yourself.
Sorry, I'm just thinking in my mind. I'm just thinking, who says I have to imagine that? Oh dear, yeah. Okay, I'm imagining.
So you're traveling all by yourself for multiple years, in fact. And after, quite a ride, you encounter a human-like species, and they can only process 3 truths about humankind before they decide to get to know or not to get to know humanity. What do you tell them?
The first thing is be patient. I don't know why, but it feels like this is where we need to start. What else do I tell them? There's a lot good around, but they hide it very well. Communicate. When in doubt, communicate.
I love it. That's very nice. And with that, I want to say one more time, thanks for communicating with me and with the audience. And thanks for being a guest on the Just Another Mindset podcast. It was so much fun. It was a very nice conversation, and it was certainly good to get in touch again. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Muna.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It was a delight speaking a lot. I hope I didn't chew off your ear, but it was very nice to see you again and to be in touch again after such a long time. And best of luck with this great podcast you have in sharing Just Another Mindset with your audience.
Thank you so much for being part of it. Thank you, Muna. If you enjoy this podcast and learn from it, please feel free to share this episode with a friend or 2, and make sure to subscribe to the Just Another Mindset podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please use the next 10 seconds to give the Just Another Mindset podcast a rating, and know that you will help me to create more meaningful content like this, and also that it will help other people to find this content and get inspired as well. If there is any future topic or guest that you would like to hear more about on the Just Another Mindset podcast, please let me know by leaving a comment on YouTube or sending a mail directly to contact@ishmaelwondergarten.com. And if nobody told you lately, be reminded that you are worthy, you matter, and you can achieve anything.
Do more of what makes you happy.
Be yourself positive.
Change.
Just another mindset.